Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the philosophical core of a genuinely fascinating sci-fi novel called The Origin Loop. Now, this isn't just your standard story about the future. It's a deep, challenging look at personal growth, technology, and what it actually means to be truly awake.
So let's jump right into the core question that the book uses to hook us from the very first page. Imagine waking up with vivid experiences from lives you've literally never lived. You're remembering places that don't exist and feeling this heavy guilt for betraying someone you've never even met. The Origin Loop asks us to consider a pretty wild idea. What if these impossible memories aren't glitches at all, but actual instructions from a deeper consciousness trying to wake us up? To explore all this, the story introduces us to a guy named Chen. He's a consciousness technician living in the absolutely stunning, bioresponsive spiral towers of Neo Singapore. Echo has access to the most advanced awareness exploration technology ever created. He actually wears a neural harmony band that monitors his mental state, bringing him a constant sense of peace and connection. But as those impossible, painful memories start bleeding into his everyday reality, his perfectly controlled world begins to fracture, and it forces him to look way beyond his privileged little bubble. All right, that brings us to Section 1, the consciousness tech illusion. See, in Neo Singapore, profound spiritual awakening has essentially been commodified. It's been turned into this illusion that you absolutely require expensive high-tech intervention to grow. Think of it like the parable of the two lighthouse keepers from the text. A high-tech electric lighthouse totally fails during a storm, right? While a simple hand-tended oil lamp manages to guide ships to safety. The keeper with the $1 million electric beacon thought he was superior, but when the power cut out, it was the keeper who knew how to tend the flame by hand and read the waves who actually saved lives. And this brilliantly illustrates the clash between two very different ideas. The assumption that enlightenment is this lonely, super expensive escape versus the reality that it actually happens in the mud of everyday human connection. Echo starts to realize that his advanced lab technology might just be a $1 million telescope built to show people stars they could already see with their naked eyes, if they just knew to look up. At the Institute of Recursive Memory, this stark divide is literally impossible to ignore. You've got the privileged entering through glowing portals for VIP access to quantum consciousness pods, while working-class citizens are relegated to the service entrance. These everyday people are out there mapping complex consciousness states using just notebooks and breathwork, yet they're being told they have to wait 18 months for basic equipment to explore states they are already naturally experiencing. It's pretty crazy. Moving right along, let's hit Section 2, when painful memories teach. This builds into a massive internal crisis for Echo, dealing with memories that feel more real than his actual life. Because consciousness, as it turns out, isn't always beautiful. We have to ask ourselves, and to quote the book's professor and monkey directly, why might consciousness use our most painful, fractured memories as a teaching tool? Echo is haunted by a recurring memory of abandoning a trusting child just to run toward this transcendent light, and it is agonizing for him. Just like the swan in the parable of the mirror lake mourning its murky reflection, Echo has to learn that the terrible, traumatic fragments of his memories are just as essential to his completeness as the beautiful ones. The swan loves its reflection when the water is perfectly still, but it grieves when the storm makes it muddy, not realizing that clear and muddy are just expressions of the exact same lake. The painful memories aren't a mistake. They're consciousness trying to teach Echo the danger of seeking pure transcendence over human responsibility. Furthermore, we get the parable of the dream garden, which shows us that a perfectly controlled, totally sterile awakening is basically lifeless compared to a messy, shadow-filled reality where unexpected wildflowers can bloom. A master gardener tries to force his real garden to look like his pristine, weedless dream, but it just becomes sterile. Only when he accepts the shadows, the weeds, and the storms does the garden truly come alive. This hits Echo hard. He realizes his sanitized, high-tech awakening is totally missing the vital, messy reality of actual human existence. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the privilege of awakening. What's really fascinating here is how the text forces Echo out of his comfortable little bubble and down into the excluded lower districts. That's where he meets Maya Rodriguez. She's a community facilitator who paints houses to pay rent. And, remarkably, she's the exact woman from his impossible memories. Maya's world represents a massive paradigm shift. It's the rigid, commodified awakening in the towers versus the wild, organic awakening happening for free in her community. It's the parable of the two rivers, one engineered and filtered, the other wild and muddy. When they finally meet, It's the merger of clarity and wild sediment that creates a rich, life-giving delta. They don't have the fancy technology, but they have each other.
And Maya delivers this absolutely powerful critique of what we call spiritual bypassing. She directly challenges Echo's assumption that reaching for cosmic transcendence is somehow superior to simply showing up for people in pain. She tells him outright that half the people in her community are having these exact same memories. Memories of privileged explorers using their spiritual insights as an excuse to completely avoid human emotions, social justice, and the hard everyday work of showing up for others. The book hammers this home through a really uncomfortable discovery by Echo supervisor Dr. Chen. It's mirrored perfectly by the parable of a high-tech mountain climber who gets totally outperformed by a shepherd who actually just pays attention to the mountain itself. Dr. Chen secretly looks at the city's data and realizes the people with the most sophisticated consciousness patterns are down in the community gardens, practicing for free. Like that mountain climber burdened by oxygen tanks and GPS, the Institute's expensive gear is actually preventing people from looking at the sky. The technology is creating a ceiling on awareness, not removing one.
Okay, let's get into Section 4, Surviving the Reality Storm. So, the real tipping point happens when a massive consciousness fluctuation, they call it a reality storm, actually hits Neo-Singapore. As this storm of raw, unfiltered collective consciousness cascades through the city's architecture, it acts as the ultimate stress test. It completely rips the mask off the city's claim that consciousness evolution is a democratic process. And when you look at the data breakdown, it reveals a horrifying truth for Dr. Chen. Up in the upper spirals, those expensive neural bands just dilute the storm into a pleasant, shallow simulation. Down in the lower districts, people with zero preparation get hit with a full-force tsunami, resulting in spontaneous enlightenment completely mixed with severe psychological trauma. But in the mid-levels where Maya's community lives, they face the raw storm without tech, but with community support. They actually hold each other through the breakthroughs and the shadows. The expensive technology wasn't protecting the rich from a dangerous event. It was protecting them from consciousness itself. It's exactly like the parable of the rain and the gardens. You've got 3 gardens receiving the exact same rain. The storm proved that awakening cannot be democratized by technology alone, but rather by communities holding the full spectrum of the human experience. The automated, shielded garden stayed pristine but sterile. The completely unprepared garden faced both devastation and unexpected miracles. But the community garden, where neighbors actually danced in the downpour and protected vulnerable seedlings together, grew incredibly vibrant. The storm didn't fail. The system is meant to serve consciousness failed by prioritizing control over community. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Awakening Through Community Service. This is really the profound synthesis of Echo's whole journey. True enlightenment isn't an escape route, it's an engagement. By stripping away the fiction, we can extract some very concrete, actionable steps for our own lives. First, we've got to question privileged systems of awareness that gatekeep natural human growth. Second, we have to abandon spiritual bypassing. Seriously, stop using transcendence as an excuse to avoid real, messy human problems. And third, we must translate our insights into grounded, community-focused service. It's about being actually useful when people are dealing with actual crises. Just look at this core mantra. It completely summarizes the ultimate shift from seeking personal peace in isolation to embracing the difficult, beautiful path of engaged collective awakening. Echo learns that community-based crisis intervention, literally just holding someone through their pain and telling them they're safe, is infinitely more advanced than any billion-dollar monitoring software out there. So I want to leave you with a final kind of provocative thought to challenge how you view your own journey of growth and connection. The origin loop beautifully illustrates that consciousness isn't trying to pull us up out of the mud, it's asking us to plant a garden right in the middle of it. So are you using your insights, your advantages, and your technology to float above the messiness of humanity? Or are you using them to fold blankets, hold hands, and finally show up for the people around you? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today. Take that question with you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.